It's not the most sexy title in the world, the importance of data discoverability and metadata, but hopefully you'll all appreciate why it's become so important. And I think what we've gone through this year and the reliance on data to make important decisions has really highlighted how important it is to make data exposed so that the masses can get hold of it, to do clever analysis and the like. So I just wanted to really sort of take a step back and think about the importance of discoverability from the wider perspective, the global perspective, if you like. I was at the AGI Geocom last month, and the first talker there was a chap called Puran Desai, who's the chief executive of an NGO called One Planet. And what he was talking about in that session was the problems that we have with the sort of global initiatives that have kicked off in previous centuries because of the almost siloed, blinkered mentality in human achievements, things like modern engineering, scientific farming, physics. Because they've been so blinkered, they've sort of missed the wider perspective of the damage that some of what they're creating has caused. So for engineering, we obviously have massive issues with climate change. We have the nuclear waste that comes from physics and plastic waste that comes from chemical engineering. So what Puran was saying is that we need to start thinking far more holistically and across the piece. And you can only do that if you're sharing your insight, your knowledge, your data more widely than your own sort of sphere of influence, if you like. And if we think about that at the more sort of micro local level, this is Ian Mackay's famous terrorist cell chart of local government organizations. What we still generally see is a lot of data collection activities happening for one single purpose, and maybe the data and the intelligence flowing up the way, but not necessarily passing across the cells, because people simply don't know that data exists in another part of the organization. So you pretty much see this wherever you look. And it's a far cry away from the sort of holistic, semantic web of data that Tim Berners-Lee was envisaging many years ago when he started talking about the 5 stars of open data. So the data analytics journey always starts with discoverability. And if we sort of compare that to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which basically says an individual can't reach their full potential unless they've got some basic requirements, then data is really not that different from that. Everyone wants to sort of concentrate on the sexy sort of analytics, the problem solving part at the top of the pyramid. But the important first stage of that is being able to find data and find where it exists and who holds it and how they can gain access to it. And if we think about this from a productivity impact, most people as data analysts are sort of aware that they spend perhaps 80% of their time actually trying to find some decent data to do anything particularly clever with. So you're only spending 20% of your time really being productive and doing the really good stuff that's going to make a difference. If you can't find data, you can't even make a start. If you can find it but you can't access it, you're frustrated. And then even if you can access it, because of the quality and the format of it, then often you're back to square one with no data to do anything with. And then also, you know, if there's nothing interoperable within the data, you can't join it together, or you might waste time and create false connections. And I think we'll probably be running future sessions when we start to explore this productivity impact and the other aspects of data that we can look to improve. If you think about it from an economic perspective, the Digital Land Review run by the Cabinet Office in 2015 identified problems in finding and accessing data. And once you start putting a monetary value on the implications of poor discoverability of data, it really starts to drill home why it's so important, I think. Over the years that we've been running the Spatial Hub, we've been trying to sort of unpick why it is that data is so difficult to make sense of. And I've been thinking about it in the context of the way that policy is developed. So when a government comes into power, they obviously have great ideas about what they want to do and how they want to achieve that. that will lead to policy development. They then go about creating strategies about how to implement that policy and how to resource it from a funding perspective. That funding will often get passed to a delivery body like a local authority or a government agency. And then theoretically, you should be able to analyze the data about that delivery, build an evidence base, and then tweak the policy and say, well, has it fulfilled what it set out to do in the first place? So that's the utopian sort of world. But even though you might have a feedback loop of sorts, we often see in policy and legislation that there'll be a notification prioritized from the delivery body back to policy, but it might be just something like the body must make a map available to the public or to policy officials whenever they so wish. That's not particularly data centric, and it's not particularly helpful. So we think there's a sort of block in this cycle here, a sort of failure. Ideally, you go back to the policy people and say, well, can you be more specific about the data you need for that policy? But that's not happening at the moment. So at the moment, we're creating a lot of sticking plasters here between this policy, the delivery body, i.e. local authorities, and any data that can really say whether the policy is working or not. So the spatial hub is really part of that sticking plaster. So what we did as part of the spatial hub, we started registering all the national data sets that we've been creating from those local data copies on the SSDI, which Joe's going to talk about shortly. Now, even though we create the structured metadata there, that's not the end of the story. What we can do with that structured metadata is then create dynamic links through to other web pages where we make that information more accessible. And it also gets harvested to data.gov.uk. And before Brexit, it got to the European Geoportal. So before you know it, just one structured metadata record there, the data is appearing in 4 separate places on the internet. And that means that through Google searches and just looking for keywords over the internet, people find it far easier to find the data sets that we're making available to them. And what that leads to is masses of people looking for that data and trying to access it. In the past 4 years that we've been running the spatial hub in this way, we've seen a sort of plethora of commercial companies. So as most people will know, the data is only accessible to the public sector and the academic sector at the moment. But we've had all these commercial sectors coming to us for data, and we've never promoted it to these people. They're simply finding it on the internet through keyword searches and things like that. And then when we look at the amount of data requests we have managed to fulfill, you can see the numbers here. The ones at the top there in the dark red color are our open data sets, funnily enough. The ones further down are the ones that we're having to restrict to just the public sector. But you can see just by making the data more accessible, you're allowing so many more opportunities for people to do clever things with it. So this is, to me, why data discoverability is just so important.